Hello everyone, I hope you have a great day. Today we are looking at some new malicious compliance stories. I hope you enjoy them. If you like the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel to grow. And now let's start with the first story, shall we? The first story is called She Didn't Want to Learn. At my job, I'm one of the supervisors. It's a firm with a lot of employees, all tucked into one big room. And there are 2 supervisors and a shift leader in each shift, morning, afternoon and night. These shifts get rotated on occasion, but we supervisors mostly rotate with them. Normally, with my typical co-supervisor, we share the responsibility of dealing with all the work-related emails. There's a lot more than one would expect, so it does sometimes take up to even a few hours of each day. One week, one of the shift leaders stopped and put me together with a different supervisor, and we were basically stuck for that month. Now she's absolutely lazy, like ridiculously so. She won't even move during lunch and go eat at the cafeteria. Instead, she makes a mess at her work desk, which would later be used by the supervisor of the next shift. I used to be the unfortunate one getting the desk from her, and it was always a crummy mess. Because of her laziness, she does none of the actual supervising and never has. During our 3rd day that week, she asked me why I was sitting at the desk for so long and if I had any intention of actually doing my job. I replied that I was doing the emails and she just got super mad, telling me that was her assigned duty. This is how she and her usual supervisor split their load. And she told me to get out of the office and go watch the workers. She pretty much screamed it, turning red in the face and all, throwing all sorts of insults at me about how my generation never works. So I told her, fine, I'm never touching the emails again. We even signed unofficial workplace contracts distributing our duties evenly, and she got the emails. Now, though we are technically all the same, I am the supervisor most likely to be promoted. So the shift leaders and the director generally talk to me and have me relay some info to the others. So I'm a lot closer to all of them than the other supers are. Well, because of this, I was the first to learn that we would need to master Excel and hop to it immediately. It wasn't yet officially announced, but when it was, the lazy bum I was stuck with first refused to learn it, saying it wasn't a skill listed as needed while we applied. Unfortunately for her, knowledge about Microsoft programs was listed. She kept postponing learning it until we officially got some work to do with Excel. During our 3rd week together, I'd use the usual routine of checking on the workers, then working with Excel until I met my quota. Well, because Miss Lazy never used Excel, she got an official warning for not meeting the quota and ended up only barely learning some stuff about it. She was still super slow and couldn't even meet the quota, let alone make up for the lost time. Now, during this, the emails, as you may have guessed, remained untouched, because Excel took her the full 8 hours. During our last week together, the director came and asked us what was going on and why was our shift always getting clogged with emails. Miss Lazy immediately tried to pin the blame on me. She forgot about the contract she insisted on us signing. I did not. Since she had already been given a warning for not learning Excel and had a previous complaint about the way she spoke to some of the other employees, she was fired. The next story is called He Wanted to Get Around the Rules. I spent about 20 years in the sign and advertising industry, primarily in design and production. So I am very familiar with rules regarding brand identity and logos. I had been at the same company for about 15 years. And I worked my way up from being an auto installer to being the primary structural and visual designer for the company. We were a small company, 35 or so employees. The sales staff was never more than 2 or 3 dedicated salespeople. Usually one for the petroleum accounts and the other 1 or 2 handled commercial accounts and private customers and one-off sales. Around 2010 or so, they promoted one of our sales guys to a managerial position, so they had to hire a new salesperson. I will call him Dingus. He was an older guy, initially pleasant enough. But he quickly began to grate on the rest of the shop due to his unwillingness to learn the ins and outs of our products and not getting thorough surveys. This always caused problems when the job was sold and went to production. This became enough of a problem that we started following up on his surveys on our own to make sure they were correct. One day, Dingus came to me with a proposal for some signage for an industrial campus for a fairly large agricultural corporation. Nothing gigantic, mostly a bunch of non-illuminated wayfinding signage with logos and colors to match the brand. But there were a lot of them, and they were easy to build, so it would be a pretty profitable job in the end. I put together a package and emailed everything over to Dingus. He sent back an email to me saying that I needed to change the colors to two completely different schemes not included in the brand guidelines. He said that the person he was working with at the company had requested those colors. I replied that they needed to consult with the corporate marketing department to authorize the change per their brand identity. I made it a point to tell him that if we produced these signs with altered brand identity, we were opening our shop to the possibility of reworking every sign at minimum, and the possibility of stepping on some toes legally. He told me to disregard their forms and to do it anyway, and that I had better have a revised package ready for him on Monday to send to the customer. This guy wasn't my boss, and his rudeness sent me off and initiated the malicious compliance. I put together the new package using the colors he requested. I made sure to call out the PMS colors on all layouts with notations in the description so there would be no doubt that this was a deliberate change. I then emailed a very nicely worded email to the sales guy and CC'd a copy to the customer's marketing for approval as a standard for our shop and their brand. I made sure to ask them to contact us with any corrections that needed to be made and provided the appropriate phone numbers for Dingus and myself on the email. Monday rolls around and I get called into the office. Dingus and the owner begin grilling me about going over Dingus' head to the customer, and how my email had caused an issue between corporate and the local manager who had requested the changes. I told my boss that I had been specifically told to disregard the customer's brand identity and I had made the changes as requested. I then pointed out the instructions from corporate marketing that said all advertising must be sent to them for approval. As I was the primary designer, I was authorized to do this, since any feedback from marketing would come to me for revision anyway. I pointed out that I was never told not to send the specs for approval, that it was part of my job to make sure that my designs would meet the customer specs. Since the on-site manager said it was okay, and I had emails telling me this was the case, I had no reason to think that there would be an issue. I knew very well this wasn't the case, but I played dumb. As it turned out, the on-site manager just didn't like the corporate color scheme and wanted to do his own thing since he was the king of his little fiefdom. Dingus just wanted the sale and was willing to break the rules to get it. My email exposed they were trying to end run around corporate just to get the sale done. The owner called corporate and confirmed that I had followed their rules to the letter, and that changes to their brand identity were not allowed without explicit approval from them. I was told I had done nothing wrong. Dingus got an extensive lecture and barely avoided being fired, but was gone a few months later. We still got the job once I corrected all the colors back. The last story is called Report Any Damage. I used to work as a supervisor of a security team at a large industrial facility. I had a good relationship with the manager, we will call him Dave. That was until he appointed his friend, Steve, as a middle manager between the supervisors and himself. I did not have a good relationship with Steve at all. And suddenly, Dave started rejecting ideas, suggestions and requests out of hand. The friendly guy that I used to go to and have sit-down chats with regularly became standoffish and outwardly hostile at times. The staff all noticed this as well and would frequently comment that they didn't know what I had done to Dave and Steve. But for them, it was clear that I was being bullied all of a sudden. It's entirely fair to say that I couldn't do anything right for them. And every little thing I did or did not do resulted in a lengthy email conversation with Dave and Steve. The site we had to patrol was about 5 square miles. So vehicles were provided so that we could patrol effectively and carry equipment and personnel to required locations. Part of my duties at the start of the shift was ensuring that the vehicles had not been damaged on the previous shift. Also, I had to make sure that all vehicles had the required levels of equipment in them. The first patrol went out the moment our shift started, and as this was a regulatory requirement, could not be delayed or skipped. This was the start of a night shift, and so it was dark, very dark. We had mag-light torches, but after 6 years of use, they weren't exactly brilliant. I didn't find any new damage and so recorded that the vehicles were okay and recorded their mileage on our check sheets. The next night when I came in, I had a very angry in tone email from Dave demanding to know why my team had damaged one of the vehicles on the previous night. Apparently, the vehicle looked as if it had been reversed into a wall. I immediately went to check the vehicle and found 2 extremely small divots in the rear bumper. I found them not by looking, but by feeling the bumper. I simply could not see them at all using the light available to me at the time. I then went and asked all of my team, and all of them insisted that they had not even used the vehicle. I went and checked the vehicle check sheets and found, true to my team's word, that the mileage on the day shift sheet was identical to the night shift sheet. The vehicle had not been moved. I sent an email back to Dave informing him that the vehicle hadn't been used by us and apologized for missing the damage, however lighting had made that extremely difficult. This was my last shift before my scheduled days off. I was certain that Steve would be pushing Dave to punish me for something by the time I got back. Sure enough, on my first day back in, I was summoned to Dave's office for what we British politely refer to as bollocking. Dave insisted that he could see the damage in the dark and could actually spot it from about 10 meters away. For context, all of my guys had been shown the damage, and all of them, without fail, asked where when I pointed it out at close range. Not only that, but there was now additional damage that I hadn't spotted and my team was also now responsible for. Luckily, my boss had included a photograph of the damage I had missed, but I couldn't see any damage on that. For Dave and Steve, however, this was good enough to be punitive towards me and my team. They told me that unless a culprit was found and named, I would be held personally responsible and would have to pay the insurance excess to get it fixed. Dave also insisted that the lighting was more than sufficient to spot the damage on the vehicles. I told him that this was ridiculous and he couldn't enforce financial penalties on a vehicle that had, again, not been used by my team. Dave was insistent though. It was my job to report 100% of the damage on the vehicles or I would be held responsible. And at this point, something clicked in my mind. And luckily, Dave decided to back up his instruction with an email that Steve was CC'd into. The next shift, I refused to allow my team to use the vehicles until they had all been fully checked. Inside, outside, underneath, mechanically and equipment levels. Each vehicle took about 2 hours. I photographed every single small bit of damage that I found, no matter how insignificant or whether it had been reported previously. The instruction was to report 100% of damage, not 100% of unreported damage. I sent it all in an email to Dave with a text description of the nature and location of the damage for each photograph. There were 162 photographs in total. The first patrol could not be skipped, and so I had to send out my officers on foot to patrol the site. This meant that the site patrol took nearly 3 hours, and he was not available to fulfill other duties afterward. It's worth noting at this point that my team was also seeing this as a direct attack on them, rather than just me. So they were fully supportive of the measures I was taking. This resulted in the site shift manager demanding answers. I was able to tell the shift manager of Dave's instructions and why I was having to send out officers out on foot. I had, and still do have, a great relationship with all the site shift managers. And so, while he was frustrated, he understood the predicament I had, especially when the instructions were shown to him in black and white. This resulted in a financial penalty for my company. Dave was off the next day, so I did the exact same thing again, with the exact same amount of photographs, but all taken again on a fresh inspection. The night shift after, I came to work to find Dave waiting in the office for me. I was allowed to finish my handover with the off-going supervisor. Then Dave shut the door and refused to let me leave before he had discussed why he had received multiple emails, and how the company had received a financial penalty and the regulatory body was coming to speak to him. I reminded him that he had demanded that I report 100% of the damage on the vehicles and that this had taken time. I couldn't allow any member of the team to use any vehicle until they had been checked, as there could be financial penalties involved. Dave frustratedly pointed out that many of the pics were too dark to see anything anyway, and so most of the photographs were pointless. I apologized for the lighting, but pointed out that he said that the lighting was more than sufficient to spot any damage, and so he should be able to easily see the damage I had reported. Dave insisted that I had deliberately misinterpreted his instructions and he would be taking it to a disciplinary. I informed him that this was no problem. I would just need the date and time so I can inform my union rep. The union had been fully appraised of the situation and was 100% behind my suggestion that I report every single tiny bit of damage on the vehicles. Dave was ultimately left with no choice but to drop any attempts to discipline me and left Steve to deal with me from that point on. Steve then took up the role of disciplinarian for the next 3 months until I left the job. However, every time he tried, I was able to shut it all down due to briefings with my union rep. I left the job at the start of last year. And I still, to this day, receive complaints from members of staff who remained there about how terrible the job has gotten due to Dave and Steve. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.